Arabella Finch did not ask the Duke of Calder to reconsider their broken engagement. She asked the Court of Chancery to lock the papers away before his solicitor could destroy them. The petition had to be made in the corridor because Mr. Silas Pomeroy was already inside the clerk's room, arguing that the engagement settlement was a private family instrument and must be returned to Calder House. Arabella stood beneath a soot-dark window with the red leather case held against her ribs while barristers, messengers and anxious petitioners pressed around her. Dominic Vane, Duke of Calder, watched from 6 paces away. 2 hours earlier he had ended their engagement without raising his voice. He had placed a letter before her, said that he would not marry a woman who threatened his mother for money, and offered an annuity if she left London quietly. Arabella had read the letter, recognized 3 separate hands disguised as one, and understood that the man she loved trusted a document more readily than he trusted her. She had returned his ring. Now Dominic looked as composed as a judge who had already delivered a merciful sentence. "Miss Finch," he said, "the settlement belongs to my family. 1 copy belongs to your family. 1 was prepared for me. The attached schedule may prove a fraud against women whose property is under this court's protection." Pomeroy emerged from the clerk's room. He was a narrow man with silver at his temples, and a voice made smooth by 30 years of being believed. "There is no attached schedule," he said. "Miss Finch is distressed. Her hopes have suffered, and she mistakes a discarded draft for evidence." Arabella opened the case just enough to show a folded deed bound with faded green tape. A disc of red wax clung to one corner, broken cleanly through the impression of a bird. "The schedule was sealed to this instrument yesterday," she said. "This morning it was cut away. The wax bears the Calder Dowager seal, not the ducal seal used on the settlement. I request that the deed be deposited until the court determines why." Pomeroy's expression did not change. His hand did. Only a fraction. 2 fingers closed against his palm. Arabella had copied beside him for 7 years. She knew every small motion by which he concealed alarm. "You removed a confidential family paper," he said. "I carried my copy from the room in which you gave it to me, before His Grace discovered your demand." The corridor quieted near them. Pomeroy knew how to make scandal travel without appearing to raise his voice. Dominic's mouth hardened. The letter he had shown Arabella claimed that she would publish a list of ruined widows unless the Dowager persuaded him to marry her and transfer £10,000 into her control. The final sentence was in Arabella's hand. So were 6 other phrases. None had originally stood beside the others. "The clerk has no authority to receive a private engagement paper," Pomeroy continued. "Give it to me." Arabella looked past him to Mr. Cobb, the elderly filing clerk. "A petition to preserve an instrument connected with a disputed trust may be received under seal pending a master's direction. You are a copyist, Miss Finch, not counsel. A copyist who has written that procedure 400 times. Mr. Cobb cleared his throat. "If she swears that delay risks destruction, I may mark the deposit provisional." Pomeroy moved between Arabella and the desk. "The document leaves this building at 4. Once it does, His Grace may dispose of his own paper as he pleases." That was the point. By evening the broken seal, the cut threads, and the indentation left by the missing schedule could be warmed, pressed, or replaced. Pomeroy did not need to win an argument. He needed the deed to leave the court. Arabella turned to Dominic. "I will swear to the risk. Will you prevent me?" He had expected tears when he ended the engagement. He had expected anger now. Her question disturbed him more than either. "Pomeroy has served my family since before my father's death," he said. "That is not an answer. You had access to my mother's correspondence. At her request. She denies authorizing the letter you wrote. She denies authorizing the letter you saw." Pomeroy gave a sorrowful sigh. "Your Grace, this is precisely the manipulation I feared." Arabella held Dominic's gaze. She would not plead that he remember her character. Love offered as evidence became a humiliation when the court rejected it. "If you believe the paper genuine," she said, "depositing the settlement will help prove it. If you believe it false, depositing it may prove who made it. Only one person here requires the evidence to leave." Dominic looked at Pomeroy. It was not trust. It was the first crack in certainty. "Deposit it," he told the clerk. Pomeroy's face went still. Arabella swore the statement, signed the ledger, and watched Mr. Cobb place the red case in a barred cabinet. Pomeroy could still influence the master, discredit her, or alter other records, but he could not erase that seal today. When she turned away, Dominic followed. "You said nothing of a missing schedule this morning. You did not ask me what the letter was. I showed you your own hand. You showed me pieces of it, and you returned my ring." Arabella stopped beneath the arch leading to Lincoln's Inn Fields. Cold spring light showed every sleepless line in his face. His regret, if he had any, was not yet for losing her. It was for discovering that his verdict might have been untidy. "You announced your decision before I had read the second paragraph," she said. "The ring had already become a judgment. I returned it to the judge." "What was on the schedule?" "Ask your mother." "I did. Ask her when Mr. Pomeroy is not in the room." Dominic's eyes narrowed. "If you have involved her in some private campaign, there, you have decided again." She walked away. Her lodging stood above a printer's shop near Fleet Street. The stairs smelled of ink, hot metal, and boiled cabbage. Arabella had once disliked the noise of presses below her. After Pomeroy dismissed her 3 years earlier for questioning a widow's altered account, every respectable law stationer in Chancery Lane had refused to employ her. The printer, Theo Marlowe, had given her a table beside his proofreaders and never asked her to apologize for accuracy. Theo looked up as she entered the composing room. He was 31, gentle in manner, perpetually inked at one thumb, and incapable of leaving a crooked line of type uncorrected. "You are no longer wearing a duke," he observed. The setting was uncomfortable. "I have always thought coronets impractical for daily use." She smiled. Across the street, unseen by Arabella, Dominic had come to ask another question. Through the open shop window he saw her smiling at Theo Marlowe, the expression warm and unguarded in a face Dominic had known mainly in repose. Theo bent toward her. She said something that made him laugh. Dominic felt the loss before he admitted jealousy. He had broken the engagement that morning without regret. That was the word he had used with his mother. Regret implied doubt, and doubt invited the sort of corrosive battle his parents had made of marriage. Better a clean ending than years of accusation. Better procedure than passion. Yet Arabella had not taken warmth out of the world when she returned his ring. She had merely taken it away from him. He left before she saw him. Inside, Theo handed Arabella a note delivered by a frightened maid from Calder House. It contained only an address and the Dowager's familiar initial. Arabella went there after dark. The Dowager Duchess of Calder waited in a hired parlour behind St. Martin's Lane, veiled like a woman conducting an affair. Lady Calder had white hair, a straight back, and the wary eyes of someone who had survived a marriage by learning which truths could be spoken in which rooms. "Dominic questioned me with Pomeroy at his elbow," she said. Every answer became another question Pomeroy had prepared. "Why did you deny my letter?" "I denied the demand he showed me. I had never seen it." "Did you tell him that?" "I tried." Pomeroy said distress had confused me. Arabella sat opposite her. "The schedule is missing." The Dowager closed her eyes. It had contained 12 names. Each belonged to a widow or unmarried woman whose property had been administered by Pomeroy under a family trust, guardianship, or chancery order. Small sums had vanished over years. Some accounts showed fictitious legal expenses. Others recorded investments never made. The women were too scattered, too ashamed of debt, or too dependent upon the Calder firm to compare their losses. Arabella had compared them. "I sealed the list to your settlement because Pomeroy could not remove it without breaking my wax," Lady Calder said. "If anything happened to me, your marriage papers would be examined by another solicitor." "Why attach it to a marriage settlement at all?" "Because Pomeroy reads my correspondence and controls my accounts. Your settlement was the only instrument he believed too valuable to mislay. He did not mislay it, he cut it away." Lady Calder's hand tightened on her reticule. "Then the women are exposed." "Not yet. I copied the names." "Where?" Arabella did not answer. The Dowager nodded with reluctant approval. "You trust no one?" "I trusted your son." The words hurt because they were simple. Lady Calder leaned forward. "Dominic is not his father." "No, his father enjoyed cruelty. Dominic calls it mercy before he closes the door. He watched 30 years of our marriage become a lawsuit conducted at dinner. When Pomeroy brought him that letter, he believed he was ending the first accusation before it bred 100 more. He believed the man who profited from the accusation. Yes, explanation did not absolve him. The Dowager knew it. She took a small packet from her reticule. Inside lay flakes of red wax and half an impression from the seal she had used. "Pomeroy returned my seal yesterday," she said. "The handle had been repaired. I thought a servant had dropped it." Arabella aligned the broken impression with a tracing she had made in the court corridor. The bird on the settlement wax was a heron. The Dowager's seal was a swan. "The wax on my copy is false," Arabella said. "But you said it was mine. It was meant to resemble yours at a glance. The bird's neck is wrong. Pomeroy needed me to believe a genuine schedule had been attached and removed. He may have replaced the entire attachment. Why? Because if I spend my strength proving a missing list, I do not ask what he added to the settlement. They looked at one another. The marriage settlement did more than provide Arabella's jointure. It reorganized several Calder trusts and confirmed Pomeroy's authority as solicitor. A fraudulent schedule might conceal powers that survived even after the engagement ended. Dominic must know, Lady Calder said. You must tell him. He will ask Pomeroy to review the document. Arabella could not deny it. Then we need the court copy before Pomeroy obtains its release, she said. And we need one person inside Calder House who can account for the seal. The Dowager named her housekeeper, Mrs. Keene. By morning, Mrs. Keene had disappeared. Pomeroy claimed she had stolen silver. A warrant was requested before breakfast. Her room had been searched and a bundle of letters removed. Dominic learned of it from Pomeroy, who presented the events as further proof that Arabella had encouraged servants to betray the family. Dominic came to Fleet Street at 9. Theo barred his way at the composing room door. Miss Finch received clients by appointment. I am not a client. That appears to be the difficulty. Arabella heard them and stepped into the passage. Dominic's gaze moved first to her bare hand, then to Theo. Mrs. Keene is missing, he said. She is avoiding arrest for a theft she did not commit. You know that before an inquiry? I know Pomeroy requested the warrant before the silver was inventoried. How? She showed him a printed court list Theo had purchased at dawn. The application time preceded the household complaint by 40 minutes. Dominic, read it. That could be a clerk's error. It could. We shall test it. We? If you want my help, there will be terms. Theo quietly returned to the composing room, leaving the door open. Arabella led Dominic to her work table. Everything we find is copied in duplicate. One set remains with Mr. Marlowe. Your mother chooses whether her correspondence is disclosed. The women's names remain concealed until each woman consents or a judge orders otherwise. You do not direct where I live, whom I see, or what work I accept. You may end the inquiry, but you may not retrieve copies already made. You would place my family papers in a printer's hands. I would place copies beyond the reach of your family solicitor. Marlowe publishes scandal sheets. He publishes parliamentary speeches, sermons, novels, and occasionally scandal supported by evidence. You defend him warmly. Arabella stared at Dominic until color rose beneath his cheekbones. That was irrelevant, he said. It was revealing. He set the court list on the table. My condition is that no document is published before I have had an opportunity to verify it. No, you may verify it. You may not hold a veto. This concerns the Calder name. It concerns money taken from women who trusted that name. They stood on opposite sides of the table where Arabella corrected proofs for a penny a page. At last Dominic said, 48 hours before publication, unless delay creates a risk of destruction or harm. 24:36. Agreed. And Mrs. Keene? We find her before Pomeroy does. The search began with paper. Arabella asked Dominic to bring every version of the settlement from Calder House. He arrived at noon with 4 bundles and no servants. She noted the concession without praising it. The first 2 drafts were written on Dutch foolscap with a Britannia watermark. The third used English paper marked with the date 1817. The final deed appeared identical until Arabella held it against the window. Its watermark showed 1819. The paper was made this year, she said. So was the deed. The page containing Pomeroy's expanded authority was supposedly copied from your father's trust memorandum dated 5 years ago. Look at the chain lines. That page was inserted now. Dominic bent nearer. The sewing is continuous. Re-sewn. She showed him tiny double holes beside the green tape. Pomeroy had opened the gathering, inserted a leaf, and stitched it again. The handwriting presented a better disguise. Pomeroy's clerk had imitated an older chancery hand, adding flourishes and pressing hard where an elderly copyist might hesitate. Arabella placed thin paper over 3 repeated words and traced the pressure ridges with the side of a soft pencil. In the genuine pages, downstrokes varied. In the inserted leaf, each capital began with the same heavy point. A copyist may imitate shape, she said. Pressure is habit. She found the decisive error in a citation to a statute governing married women's equitable property. The inserted clause used an abbreviation adopted in Pomeroy's office only after a new printed digest appeared the previous autumn. Arabella knew because she had corrected the digest proofs for Theo. This form did not exist 5 years ago. Dominic looked at her as though seeing not a former fiancé, but an instrument of exact measurement. Would a court accept that? Not alone. With the watermark, sewing holes, office practice, and original memorandum. Yes. Where is the original? Pomeroy says it was lost. Then we have an elegant accusation and no anchor. We have a path. They followed it through fee books, trust accounts, and old petitions. Arabella recognized cases she had copied years earlier. Mrs. Hester Blythe had been charged for 3 hearings that never occurred. Miss Caroline Webb's railway debenture had been sold, though her account still listed it as held. Lady Miriam Say's trust paid rent on an office Pomeroy owned through his brother. 12 names became 18. Dominic read until his face lost color. These accounts were approved under my guardianship in 2 cases. You signed summaries. I signed lies. You signed without reading the underlying papers. He did not defend himself. Yes, it was the first honest thing he had given her without being forced. At dusk, Theo brought food. He set a meat pie near Arabella's left hand, where she could reach it without moving the documents, and a plate before Dominic with the solemn courtesy of a host tolerating an occupying army. "Mr. Marlowe," Dominic said, "how did you obtain the printed digest?" "By printing it. Pomeroy told me it was produced by Bell & Son. Bell bound it. My name appears in 6-point type beneath the errata." Arabella found the line. Pomeroy had cited the digest's private circulation as proof that the abbreviation could have been used earlier. Theo's press books would show when the type had been set. "You keep records?" Dominic asked. Theo looked offended. "I am a printer." They went below to the press ledger. The abbreviation appeared in a proof dated October 1818. The inserted leaf claimed to reproduce language from 1814. Dominic closed the ledger. "This may stop Pomeroy from releasing the settlement, if we reach the master before he does." A boy from Chancery arrived at that moment with a note. Pomeroy had obtained an order to release the deposited deed at 10 the next morning. He had also filed a complaint accusing Arabella of stealing privileged documents and conspiring with a printer to extort a peer. Theo read it over her shoulder. "I have always wanted to conspire with a peer. I expected better refreshments." Arabella did not smile. The complaint could end her examination before she took it. No firm would sponsor a woman accused of theft. Pomeroy had struck at the future she had not told Dominic about. "What examination?" Dominic asked when she folded the paper. She had not realized she had spoken aloud. "The Scriveners' Company has agreed to test my competence to act in petitions concerning women's separate property," she said. "Not as a barrister, as an authorized scrivener under supervision. The hearing is next month." "You did not tell me. Our engagement conversations rarely reach my work before they return to your estates." He absorbed the rebuke. "Will the complaint prevent it? If it remains unanswered, then I will order Pomeroy to withdraw it." "No, Arabella, you cannot teach him that a woman's standing depends upon which powerful man commands him most recently. My name began this. Your belief began part of it. His fraud began the rest. Help me prove the distinction." Dominic paced once across the narrow room, stopped before Theo's press, and visibly put down the order forming in his mouth. "What do you need?" "A sworn statement that the settlement copy was in Pomeroy's custody until yesterday. Access to Calder House filing rooms. And your promise that if the evidence harms your family, you will not close the door. You ask me to promise an unknown cost. So did every woman whose trust bore your seal." He looked at the 18 names. "You have it," he said. The next morning, the Chancery Master delayed release of the deed after Arabella demonstrated the new watermark and re-sewn gathering. Pomeroy objected that a discarded engagement document had no bearing on the trusts. "Then its detention cannot injure you," Arabella replied. The Master disliked being entertained by a female copyist, but he disliked altered court papers more. He granted 3 days. Outside, Dominic found his mother waiting in a hired carriage. Lady Calder had come without Pomeroy for the first time in years. "I told the Master the seal was not mine," she said. "He believed I was mistaken until Miss Finch showed him the swan and the heron." Dominic looked at Arabella. "You met my mother after I ended the engagement. She asked for help." "And before?" "Often." "About the trusts?" Arabella glanced at the dowager. The choice was hers. Lady Calder opened the carriage door. "Get in, Dominic. You may discover that women speak even when you are absent." They rode to a small chapel near Holborn, where Mrs. Keene had taken refuge with her married sister. The housekeeper had not stolen silver. She had removed the dowager's seal press and 2 packets of letters, because Pomeroy's clerk came to search the rooms. The silver listed as missing was found in Calder House's plate cupboard before noon. Mrs. Keene possessed one more piece of evidence, the broken wooden handle from the dowager's genuine seal. Pomeroy had borrowed it a week earlier, claiming a deed required confirmation. When it cracked, his clerk substituted a similar matrix while the original was repaired. The false matrix bore the heron. Who made it? Arabella asked. A seal cutter in Clerkenwell, Mrs. Keene said. The bill came to the house. Mr. Pomeroy told me to enter it as a mourning ring. Dominic shut his eyes briefly. My office approved the account. Your office is Pomeroy, his mother said. That is the trouble. Mrs. Keene also remembered delivering a packet from Arabella to the Dowager. Pomeroy intercepted it in the front hall. Later he returned only one page, resealed. The missing pages contained the trust names. The letter Dominic had used to end the engagement was not merely forged. It had been built from that packet. Arabella asked Mrs. Keene to describe every fold. The housekeeper showed how the original pages had been crossed, not folded in thirds. Dominic's blackmail letter carried both patterns because narrow strips had been pasted onto a fresh sheet. May I see it? Arabella asked. Dominic hesitated. You burned it, she said. No. Then where is it? In my desk. Why did you not bring it with the settlement? Because I believed it concerned only us. Arabella's anger came cold. The document by which you condemned me was too private to examine and public enough to end our engagement. I was ashamed. Of me? Of how quickly I wanted certainty. His answer reached her, but not far enough to soften the fact. Bring it, she said. He did. Under magnification, the joins were visible. Pomeroy had cut phrases from Arabella's genuine warnings to the Dowager. I must have the names protected. Dominic must act before the settlement. £10,000 has disappeared. £10,000 has disappeared. If he will not listen, publication may be the only remedy. Rearranged, the phrases became a demand that £10,000 be settled upon Arabella before marriage, or the names would be published. The final line, I will not be silenced again, came from a letter Arabella wrote 3 years earlier after Pomeroy dismissed her. Dominic, read the restored sequence. You were protecting them. I was trying. Why did you not tell me? At first because your mother asked for privacy. Later because every attempt to speak of Pomeroy became a lesson from you about loyalty. I would have listened. She looked at him. He lowered his gaze. No, I did not. They sat at the long library table in Calder House, the broken seal between them. Evening light crossed shelves Dominic had inherited and scarcely opened. My parents fought through solicitors, he said. Every kindness became a clause. Every injury returned as evidence at dinner. When my father died, I promised myself I would never build a marriage on accusation. Pomeroy showed me your letter, and I thought ending the engagement at once was the one merciful act available. Mercy for whom? For myself, perhaps. The admission held no request for comfort. Arabella touched the edge of the pasted page. When my former employer altered Mrs. Blythe's account, I protested. Pomeroy told every stationer that I had copied confidential material and invented a grievance after he refused my advances. Men who had praised my hand would not let me enter their offices. I learned that truth without custody is merely a story told by the person least likely to be believed. And now I have repeated it. You gave his story a title. He flinched. I do not say that to punish you, she continued. I say it because if we work together, you may not decide that your pain ends the inquiry. I understand. Not yet. He accepted that too. The following 2 days were devoted to finding the original trust memorandum. Pomeroy insisted it had been destroyed in a damp archive room. Arabella doubted both the destruction and the damp. A solicitor who erased a useful authority seldom destroyed the paper that might restore it if challenged. She began with copying charges. Every important Calder instrument had been copied at least twice, once for the family, once for the solicitor, sometimes once for a trustee or beneficiary. Pomeroy's office books listed a payment in 1814 to a law stationer named Edwin Rusk. Rusk had died, but his widow still sold paper near Temple Bar. Mrs. Rusk remembered the Calder work because Pomeroy disputed the bill. She led Arabella, Dominic and Theo into a cellar filled with tied bundles. Damp had indeed reached the lower shelves, but the Rusk ledgers were dry above them. 5 shillings for a search, Mrs. Rusk said. 10. If you expect me to remember a Duke's paper from 5 years ago. Dominic reached for his purse. 5, Arabella said. We require the ledger, not flattery. Mrs. Rusk smiled. I like her. That is becoming a difficulty for me, Dominic said. Arabella pretended not to hear. The ledger showed that Rusk copied a Calder trust memorandum on 6 sheets, delivered in duplicate. Pomeroy's surviving version held 5. The missing sheet concerned limitations on the solicitor's authority, No sale of securities without 2 trustees' signatures. No transfer between beneficiary accounts, and annual independent review accounts, and annual independent review. He did not expand an old power, Theo said. He removed the limits and wrote himself a new one. Mrs. Rusk found the file wrapper but no copy. On its back, however, Edwin had listed the names of the compositors who prepared a printed abstract for the trustees. One still worked in London. They found him at a newspaper office, nearly deaf and wholly suspicious of noblemen. He remembered the job because the abstract contained a typographical error. The phrase 2 trustees jointly had been set as 2 trustees justly. Pomeroy demanded every copy destroyed. Printers do not destroy every copy, Theo said. The old compositor looked offended. Of course not. He had kept the faulty proof as a specimen of fine small type. It lay inside a broadside collection in his attic. The paper was brittle, but the language was legible. It restored every limit Pomeroy had removed. The proof gave them language, but the false seal still required a maker. Mrs. Keene's bill named only J. Bell, artificer, and Clerkenwell contained more bells than church towers. Arabella traced the trade through directories, tax rolls, and advertisements. Most seal cutters advertised heraldic accuracy. One, Josiah Bell, advertised discretion. His shop stood behind a watchmaker's court, its window crowded with signet rings and brass dies. Bell denied knowing Pomeroy until Arabella set the broken heron impression beside 3 samples from his display. The same engraver cut those feathers, she said. Birds have feathers, madam. Yours have a notch at the 3rd barb because your graver slips when you turn left. Bell swept the samples from the window ledge. Dominic moved toward him. Do not threaten him, Arabella said. I had not spoken. Your coat has. Dominic stepped back. Arabella asked Bell to bring his order book. He refused on grounds of client confidence. That confidence does not cover a seal made to imitate another person's mark, she said. You cannot prove imitation. Not without the book. Then we are finished. Theo, who had remained near the door, examined a tray of discarded trial impressions. Printers save errors, he said. Do engravers? Bell's eyes moved toward the stove. Arabella reached it first, not touching anything. Ash filled the grate, but a strip of thick paper remained beneath the coal scuttle. It bore half a red heron and the reversed letters CAL. You may burn your own trial sheets, she said. If a court officer searches, he will decide whether this is yours. Bell sat down. Pomeroy had ordered 2 matrices. One copied the dowager's seal badly enough to be denied if discovered. The other reproduced the ducal arms for letters Pomeroy wished servants to obey without showing Dominic. Bell had objected. Pomeroy produced an authorization bearing Dominic's signature. Did you keep it? Arabella asked. He took it. Did anyone see it? My apprentice. The apprentice had left the previous week after Pomeroy paid his passage to Bristol. Dominic's frustration sharpened. Convenient. For Pomeroy, Arabella said. Not necessarily fatal to us. How did the authorization arrive? By messenger. On what paper? Bell described a blue-laid sheet with a small shell watermark. Arabella had copied Dominic's ordinary instructions. Calder House used cream-wove paper. Pomeroy's office used blue-laid sheets for internal memoranda. And the signature? I do not study writing. You studied it well enough to risk prison. Bell swallowed. The downstroke of the V cut through the paper. I remember because the point snagged. Dominic signed with a broad nib and light pressure. Pomeroy's imitations were heavy. Bell agreed to give a sealed statement if the court protected him from immediate arrest. Arabella would promise no such protection. She offered to record that he cooperated before a warrant issued. That is not comfort, Bell said. It is the truth. He signed. Outside, Dominic asked why she had not let him promise leniency. Because it is not yours to grant. I could ask the magistrate. Then ask. Do not trade an authority you do not possess. They walked toward Fleet Street carrying the statement between 2 boards to protect the wet ink. A gust caught Arabella's bonnet ribbon. Dominic lifted his hand, then stopped. May I? The question concerned only a ribbon. It also concerned the space in which so many of his assumptions had lived. Yes. He retied it without brushing her cheek. His fingers were less certain than his voice had ever been. Thank you, she said. They continued past shops bright with lamps. What would you do if you passed the examination? He asked. Work. That answer is designed to punish a foolish question. A little. What work? Arabella looked at the parcels carried by clerks around them. Petitions for women who cannot discover what they own because every account is addressed to a father, husband, guardian, or trustee. I would make copies they can keep. I would explain the words without charging them for the privilege of being confused. You would need an office. 2 rooms, one for clients, one for records. A cabinet with 2 locks so no single person controls access. Where? Near Chancery Lane. Calder owns. He stopped himself. Calder owns property everywhere, she said. I was about to offer a lease. I know. And you were about to refuse because accepting would place your work beneath my favor. Yes. May I ask whether there is a form of help that would not? She considered him. Support a public fund for copies in indigent cases. Do not name it after yourself. Do not appoint me to administer it. Let the court clerks and petitioners design the rules. That offers me no control. You have identified its chief merit. He almost smiled. Will you advise them? If they ask. For half a street they walked in companionable silence. At Theo's shop a woman waited beneath the awning. Mrs. Blythe had come after hearing that Arabella was examining Pomeroy's trusts. Her husband had died 12 years earlier. She believed her settlement exhausted by litigation. Yet Pomeroy still sent annual forms for her signature. Arabella took her upstairs, offered tea, and asked Dominic to wait below. My name may reassure her, he said. Your name appears on the approvals. The truth stopped him. Mrs. Blythe brought a bundle of receipts tied in a child's blue ribbon. She had paid fees by selling furniture. One receipt bore the number of a hearing that belonged to another estate. Another charged for counsel who had died the year before. Will I have to speak in court? She asked. Perhaps, Arabella said. You may first permit us to compare the papers without using your name. If the court later requires you, you may decide then whether to proceed. And if I do nothing? We return every original. Nothing is published. Mrs. Blythe wept with relief at being offered inaction without rebuke. After she left, Arabella found Dominic in the composing room helping Theo lift a paper frame. His coat lay over a chair. Printer's ink marked one cuff. You waited, she said. You asked me to. No grand sacrifice could have moved her as strangely as the simple fact. Theo handed Dominic a cloth. His Grace has learned that paper ignores rank. Paper and Miss Finch share the quality. Arabella smiled. Dominic saw it and, this time, understood that the warmth had not been stolen from him. It had to be invited by conduct. Then the messenger from Lady Say arrived with the musicale invitation and a warning. Pomeroy intended to make the dispute public before the court could hear it. Dominic offered the man £50. Arabella stopped him. The proof is evidence. Payment after discovery will be described as purchase. Then how do we compensate him? The court may reimburse production. Mr. Marlowe may also pay a normal archival fee and record it in his books. Theo did so. Dominic watched the transaction as though learning a foreign ceremony in which his generosity could be dangerous. Outside, Theo went to hire a cab. Arabella remained beneath the newspaper awning with Dominic while rain darkened the street. You smiled at him, Dominic said. At Mr. Marlowe? The morning after our engagement ended. Were you watching the shop? I came to speak to you. And left because I smiled? I left because I realized I had never seen you smile that way with me. The jealousy was not flattering. It was evidence of how he had measured affection by access and assumed reserve belonged to her nature rather than his presence. Theo believed me when believing me cost him business, she said. He did not require gratitude afterward. Ease grows in such soil. Do you love him? You gave up the right to ask. Dominic looked out at the rain. Yes. She had expected defense. His agreement left the anger without a surface. I do not know what I feel for Theo, she said at last. He is my friend. He has never asked me to define it for his peace. I will not ask again. Theo returned with the cab. He looked between them and wisely discussed only the weather. Pomeroy made his next move at Lady Say's musicale. The gathering was meant to support a charitable school, but half London attended because rumour promised the Duke of Calder, his discarded fiancé, and the mild printer seen frequently in her company. Arabella would have avoided it. Lady Say was one of the women on the protected list and had asked her to come. Dominic arrived alone. Pomeroy stood with 2 Chancery solicitors near the musicians, speaking in confidential tones that travelled perfectly. When Arabella entered with Theo, heads turned. She felt the old machinery of exclusion begin. Recognition, silence, appraisal, conclusion. Lady Say met her at the door. You may use my name, she whispered. I am tired of being protected into poverty. Are you certain? No, certainty is a luxury. I am willing. That mattered more. During the interval, Pomeroy requested the room's attention. He held a printed sheet alleging that Arabella and Theo had prepared a scandal pamphlet to force Dominic into restoring the engagement. The supposed prospectus promised details of Calder widows, stolen fortunes, and a duke deceived by desire. Theo read the sheet and snorted. "The type is not mine. Your imprint appears below," Pomeroy said. "Badly." Pomeroy turned to the guests. "Miss Finch first sought advancement through marriage. When His Grace discovered her demands, she transferred her attentions to a publisher willing to profit from private grief. She now manipulates both men, one through attachment, the other through commerce." Arabella's face burned, not because the accusation was clever, but because it joined the two oldest punishments available to a working woman. She could not be competent without seduction, and she could not be paid without greed. Dominic stepped forward. "The sheet is false." "Your Grace's defense is understandable," Pomeroy replied. "It is also further proof of her influence." Every word Dominic offered would become another chain around her credibility. Arabella took the paper from Pomeroy. "Mr. Marlowe, when was this printed?" Theo examined it. "Within 2 days. The ink is still oily in the heavy strokes." "Your press?" "No. The long S is from an old fount I do not own. The rule beneath the title is cracked at the center." Lady Say's steward knew a printer whose rule bore that defect. He worked for Pomeroy's political clients. Pomeroy smiled. "How convenient that the alleged conspirators can identify their rivals' tools." Arabella held the sheet toward a candle. The watermark emerged, a crown over the initials SP. "Your private stationery," she said. "Paper is sold." "Yes, in reams. Your office account will show whether this sheet came from one." The guests shifted. Pomeroy had not won, but he had achieved what he wanted. Tomorrow every report would name Arabella, Dominic, and Theo in the same paragraph. The scriveners' examiners would see scandal before evidence. Dominic crossed to her when the music resumed. "Leave with my mother. I will tell the company you are ill." "I am not ill. Pomeroy has arranged reporters outside. Then I will walk past them. He will twist anything you say. He will twist my silence." Dominic lowered his voice. "For once, let me remove you from the danger." "For once?" He heard the error. "I mean tonight. Tonight is the public version of the private choice you keep making. You decide the room is dangerous, and I become the object moved from it. I am trying to preserve your examination. By telling the examiners that I fall ill when challenged, by preventing further scandal. Scandal has already entered. Evidence must follow it." He looked toward the doors where Pomeroy's men waited. Fear sharpened his face into authority. "The Calder carriage will take you to my mother's house. We will finish this privately." Arabella removed the archive room key he had given her and placed it in his hand. "No," she said. "Do not be unreasonable. That word has closed more doors than any lock." She turned to Lady Say. "May I speak?" The older woman took her arm and led her to the center of the room. Arabella did not reveal the hidden names. She revealed her own. "Mr. Pomeroy has accused me of extortion, theft, and improper influence. I have deposited answers to those charges with the Court of Chancery. I will present them in public if permitted. I ask no one here to believe me because a duke once intended to marry me, or because another man prints my work. Examine the paper. Examine the accounts. Examine who profits when women are taught that asking for records is shameful." Lady Say stood beside her. "My trust is one of the accounts." The room changed. Pomeroy went pale. A woman he could call ambitious was manageable. A titled beneficiary naming herself was not. Dominic remained near the carriage door, the key in his palm. He had tried to save Arabella from the moment in which she gained her strongest witness. She left with Theo. At the printer's shop, she packed the copies she had made and moved them to Mrs. Rusk's strong room. Dominic arrived after midnight. "I was wrong," he said before she spoke. "Yes. Pomeroy's men followed your cab." Theo noticed. "We changed vehicles at Temple Bar. You should have told me. You had just ordered me into yours." He looked at the tied bundle on her table. "Are you ending the inquiry?" "I am ending my work under your private authority. I will proceed as a petitioner and witness. Your family may submit evidence through the court. That will slow everything. It will make custody clear. Arabella, the proof from Rusk, is copied and deposited, and my mother's letters remain hers. You planned for this." "I planned for interruption. I did not know whether it would come from Pomeroy or you." The sentence struck him harder than anger. "What can I do?" he asked. "Learn the difference between helping the truth and owning its root." "And us?" Arabella folded the cloth over her writing box. There is no us to discuss. He glanced toward the composing room where Theo worked late. This time he did not ask. I will leave, he said. Yes. Dominic walked back to Calder House without calling his carriage. The streets were almost empty, and for the first time in years no servant or solicitor moved ahead to clear his path. He entered the library where Pomeroy had advised his father, managed his mother, and taught a young duke that good order meant papers arriving with decisions already summarized. Dominic opened the trust cabinet himself. It took him 6 hours to understand the filing system. Arabella would have done it in 1. He found petitions she had copied, each marked in Pomeroy's hand with comments about the petitioner: troublesome, sentimental, ignorant, unlikely to sue. The descriptions, not the merits, determined which accounts received scrutiny. In a drawer labeled Family Embarrassment, he found the original pages cut from Arabella's letters. Beside them lay the missing schedule of women's names and Pomeroy's draft of the forged demand. The draft carried corrections in red pencil, Dominic's father's pencil. For one sickening moment, relief tempted him. A dead man could bear the blame. Then Dominic examined the dates. His father had begun the practice of moving small sums among trusts to cover Calder estate debts. Pomeroy continued after his death, expanded it, and used Dominic's signatures to conceal the theft. The family had benefited. Dominic's restored estates, repaired roofs, and parliamentary independence had been partly purchased with women's money. The deepest proof lay in a privilege register listing confidential consultations between the Calder family and Pomeroy. Revealing it would destroy the family's claim to legal confidentiality and expose years of private debts. It might also cost Dominic his seat on a royal charitable commission and invite claims large enough to force land sales. Arabella had predicted an unknown cost. Now it had a number. At dawn, Dominic sent copies to the court through an independent solicitor. He instructed the estate steward to freeze all transfers, open beneficiary accounts, and prepare properties for sale. He dismissed Pomeroy in writing, but did not warn him which evidence had been found. Then Dominic went to his mother. Lady Calder listened without interruption. Your father began it, she said. You knew? I knew he borrowed from my trust and replaced it. I did not know he took from others. Pomeroy will argue family privilege. Will you? Dominic looked at the faded portrait of his parents. No. Then you may finally become unlike him. The public hearing took place 4 days later before a chancery judge in a room too small for the crowd. Pomeroy had requested it, believing he could exclude Arabella's evidence as stolen and her testimony as malicious. Newspapers filled the backbenches. Members of the Scriveners' Company sat near the aisle. Lady Say came openly. 6 other women from the list sat behind screens by permission of the court. Arabella arrived with Theo and Mrs. Rusk. She wore grey, not from modesty, but because it showed no ink. Dominic sat with his new solicitor across the room. He did not approach her. Pomeroy began by presenting the forged prospectus and the reconstructed blackmail letter. He described Arabella as a rejected woman who had ensnared a radical publisher and exploited the dowager's age. He suggested Dominic's changing account proved the Duke remained under her emotional influence. Miss Finch smiles for Mr. Marlowe and commands his grace, Pomeroy said. One man supplies the press, the other the title. She supplies only grievance. The judge asked whether Arabella possessed legal standing to answer. Before her counsel could rise, Dominic requested leave to speak. Arabella's body went still. I will hear his grace, the judge said. Dominic stood. My lord, I do not ask the court to believe Miss Finch because I do. Pomeroy smiled faintly. Indeed, Dominic continued, my belief has been unreliable. I ended my engagement to Miss Finch after reading a document Mr. Pomeroy supplied. I did not permit her to explain it. I mistook haste for mercy and my rank for judgment. Later, when she began to prove the fraud, I attempted to remove her from public scrutiny without her agreement. These actions injured her and assisted Mr. Pomeroy. The room became utterly quiet. I now waive on behalf of the Calder estate every claim of family confidentiality necessary to examine the trust register, my father's instructions, my own signatures, and all consultations with Mr. Pomeroy concerning these accounts. His new solicitor closed his eyes briefly. Reporters bent over their notes. The judge frowned. Your Grace, that waiver may expose the estate to extensive civil claims. It should. It may affect matters beyond this petition. It should. Dominic placed the privilege register on the clerk's table. I also resign my position on the Metropolitan Widows Commission pending investigation. The court should know that Calder lands benefited from transfers now alleged to be improper. Miss Finch did not create that fact. She found it after I failed to look. Pomeroy rose. This extraordinary confession demonstrates precisely the influence. No, Dominic said, then checked himself and addressed the judge. Forgive me, my lord. Mr. Pomeroy's argument depends upon making Miss Finch responsible for every choice a man makes after hearing her. I submit the papers because they are true. I accept their cost because it is mine. He returned to his seat. He had not defended Arabella's purity, beauty, or loyalty. He had removed the privilege Pomeroy used to block her evidence and named his own failure without making her forgive it. The judge looked toward Arabella. Miss Finch, you may present your petition. She rose with the broken seal in a small wooden tray. My lord, His Grace's waiver permits examination, she said. It does not prove my conclusions. She began with custody. Mr. Cobb confirmed the engagement deed had entered the court cabinet before Pomeroy could recover it. Mrs. Keene identified the false heron matrix and produced the seal-cutter's bill. Mrs. Rusk supplied her husband's ledger. The old compositor identified the faulty proof restoring the missing limits. Theo produced the 1818 press record that dated Pomeroy's abbreviation. Lady Say consented to disclosure of her account. Arabella demonstrated the watermark and double sewing holes. She laid transparent tracings over repeated capitals to show the copied pressure pattern. She compared Pomeroy's genuine office hand with the imitation of an elderly clerk. Finally, she reconstructed her cut letters in their original order. The edges matched. The fibers crossed each join like lines on a map. The alleged demand was assembled from warnings, she said. Mr. Pomeroy changed protection into threat by moving the words. Pomeroy's counsel argued that a copyist could have created the joins herself. Yes, Arabella said, which is why shape alone is insufficient. She produced Pomeroy's red pencil draft from the Calder cabinet. The corrections matched marks in his undisputed account books. More importantly, one pasted phrase in the final letter corrected a spelling error that remained in Arabella's original. Pomeroy's draft instructed the correction before the strip was cut. The judge examined it. Pomeroy's composure broke. Those cabinet papers were privileged. The privilege has been waived, the judge said. They were stolen. Dominic did not rise. His new solicitor produced the independent custody receipt made at dawn. Arabella turned to the accounts. She did not read all 18 names. 7 women had consented. Their losses formed a pattern. Invented hearings, false rent, securities sold, and carried as assets, transfers to Calder estate creditors. The remaining names were submitted under seal. Secrecy protected the victims from gossip, Arabella said. It also protected the theft from comparison. The answer is not to publish every injury. It is to give each beneficiary records, independent advice, and the choice to speak. The judge asked what personal benefit she sought. Restoration of the accounts. Withdrawal of the complaint against me. Recognition that copies made in the ordinary course of trust work may be examined for fraud. I seek no payment from His Grace and no order concerning our former engagement. Pomeroy seized upon the final phrase. Former, my lord. She still keeps the ring. Arabella opened her hand. The ring was not there. I returned it on the morning His Grace judged me, she said. I have not asked for it since. Dominic's face did not move. Only his hand tightened once on the bench. The hearing continued through the afternoon. The judge ordered Pomeroy's papers seized, suspended his authority over every connected trust, and appointed independent receivers. Criminal questions would go elsewhere. Civil restoration would take months, perhaps years. The law did not transform into justice because truth had entered one room, but the truth had entered. Outside, reporters surrounded Dominic. He gave them the account numbers and the name of the receiver, not Arabella's lodging or private history. When asked whether he intended to renew the engagement, he said, Miss Finch's future is not a remedy for my reputation. Arabella heard from the courthouse steps. Theo stood beside her. That was almost intelligent. He has always been intelligent. A more dangerous defect, then. She smiled at him. Dominic saw the smile. Jealousy still came, sharp and undignified. This time he did not turn it into a question she must answer. He bowed to them both and walked toward the receiver's office. For 3 months Calder property was sold. A hunting lodge covered 3 widows' immediate losses. London Paintings paid legal costs. Dominic opened the estate ledgers to tenant trustees and reduced his own household. Society called it noble sacrifice until Arabella corrected a newspaper editor. Repayment is not sacrifice, she said. It is a debt becoming visible. The sentence was printed. Pomeroy's complaint against her was dismissed. The Scriveners' Company postponed her examination because several members feared controversy. Arabella petitioned for written reasons and published those reasons beside the court's finding. Theo printed the pamphlet under her full name. The company relented. On the morning of her examination, Dominic arrived at the hall and took a seat in the public gallery. He brought no flowers, no solicitor, and no message requesting a private word. Arabella answered questions on petition form, trusts, custody, fees, and equitable property. One examiner asked whether her public dispute proved she lacked discretion. Discretion protects a client's interests, she said. Silence protects whoever benefits from the absence of records. They are not the same. She passed. Her certificate authorized limited practice in women's property petitions under named supervision, more modest than she hoped, and more real than anything previously offered. She rented 2 rooms near Chancery Lane. The brass plate read Arabella Finch, Scrivener. Theo attended the small supper celebrating her first client. So did Lady Say, Mrs. Rusk, Mrs. Keene, and the Dowager. Dominic did not come because Arabella had not invited him. He sent a ledger. It was bound in plain brown calf with no crest. On the first page he had written one sentence: for decisions whose reasons must remain visible. No plea followed. Arabella used it for office accounts. Dominic began attending public hearings concerning the restored trusts. He sat behind the beneficiaries and spoke only when called. When reporters praised him for exposing Pomeroy, he gave them Arabella's published evidence list. When a commissioner offered to restore his charitable seat, he declined until every account had been reviewed. He wrote to Arabella once a month. The letters contained questions she could ignore: whether Lady Blythe had received her funds, whether the independent receiver's notice was clear, whether a proposed estate sale would disturb a tenant settlement. He did not mention love for 4 months. In the 5th letter, he wrote, "I miss you. This is information, not a claim." Arabella placed the letter in the plain ledger and waited a week before answering. I know. Winter passed. The broken heron seal remained in the court evidence room until Pomeroy's trial. Afterward, the clerk returned it to Arabella because no one else claimed a false family emblem. She kept it in her office drawer as a paperweight. One April afternoon, Dominic came for a scheduled consultation. A tenant widow on the Calder estate wished to convert a life interest into an annuity and independent lease. Dominic had brought all relevant papers, including a page unfavorable to his preferred arrangement. "You included the repair arrears," Arabella said. "They affect the value. Your former steward would have omitted them. My former steward learned from my former solicitor. And your present duke is trying to learn from his former fiancée." The title passed between them without injury for the first time. They worked for 2 hours. Dominic asked whether she recommended the lease. Arabella said yes, subject to the widow receiving separate advice. He agreed. When the papers were tied, he remained seated. "May I ask a personal question?" "You may ask. Are you happy?" Arabella considered the office. 2 desks, shelves of forms, a coal fire that smoked in east wind, and 3 new petitions awaiting copies. "Often. With Marlowe?" She raised an eyebrow. Dominic exhaled. "That was not the question I meant to ask. But it remains the question you wish answered." "Yes. Theo is my dearest friend. He is engaged to his compositor's sister." Relief crossed Dominic's face before discipline could hide it. "You are smiling," Arabella said. "I am attempting not to." "Why?" "Because your friend's happiness should not be reduced to my hope." That answer was better than concealment. "Theo will be offended that you consider him harmless only when engaged." "I have never considered him harmless. He has a printing press." Arabella laughed. The sound surprised them both. Dominic looked at her as he had through the Fleet Street window, but there was no entitlement in it now. Only wonder and grief for the ease he had once made impossible. "I loved you," she said. His expression stilled. "I know that now," he replied. "You knew it then." "I knew you had agreed to marry me. I treated that as proof I no longer needed to keep earning your trust." "And do you love me?" "Yes." He did not move closer. "I do not ask you to restore the engagement," he continued. "I would like permission to court you, with no announcement and no assumption of an answer. If you refuse, the trust work and every repayment continue unchanged." Arabella opened the drawer and took out the broken seal. "Do you know what this means to me? That evidence must be preserved. More than that, a seal once told me who had authority. This false one taught me that authority can be copied. The break is where examination begins." She set it between them. "If I permit courtship, you will not buy this office." "Agreed. You will not send clients who require me to flatter you. I shall warn them you are constitutionally unable. You will not treat every disagreement as the beginning of your parents' marriage." His humor faded. "I will try." If I fail, I will not call departure mercy before asking what happened, and there will be no engagement until I decide trust has returned. There may never be one. Yes. He looked at the brass plate on her door, the work bearing her own name, and the broken seal neither of them could make whole. Then I ask for the chance to know you without a verdict prepared, he said. Arabella extended her hand across the desk. You may begin with dinner on Thursday. He took her hand after the smallest pause, giving her time to withdraw it. At Calder House? He asked. No. Theo's wedding supper. You may discover whether a printer is less dangerous when married. I doubt it. Good. You are learning. Months later, when Dominic asked again whether she would marry him, he did so in Arabella's office after closing time. No family solicitor had drafted conditions. No guests waited for an announcement. The restored trust accounts stood on the shelves behind them. Arabella did not answer immediately. She asked about residence, property, clients, separate earnings, and the right to publish findings against Calder interests. Dominic answered each question and wrote the terms in his own hand. Then he took the paper to an independent solicitor chosen by her. Only after the deed returned clear and examinable did Arabella say yes. They did not replace the broken seal on the marriage settlement. Arabella pressed it into a small frame and hung it above the office cabinet where clients deposited disputed papers. Beneath it she placed a line in plain black type. A promise is safest when both people may read the terms, question the power, and still choose one another. Dominic read it on the morning of their wedding. Is that intended for me? He asked. For anyone who enters. Then I shall continue entering carefully. Arabella locked the cabinet, placed the key in her own pocket, and offered him her hand. This time the paper between them was neither threat nor judgment. It was a record of questions answered freely, its seal left unbroken because neither of them required silence to keep it whole. The restored trusts did not disappear from their lives after the wedding. Mrs. Blythe became the first petitioner to receive a complete copy of her account without paying a solicitor for permission to read it. Lady Say joined a committee of beneficiaries who reviewed fees twice each year. Theo printed a plain guide explaining how a woman might request her own papers, and Dominic paid for half the copies through the anonymous public fund Arabella had proposed. His name appeared nowhere on them. When the first bundle arrived at Arabella's office, Dominic helped carry it upstairs and stopped at the cabinet. Which key? He asked. Mrs. Blythe keeps the second. Not your husband? Especially not my husband. He laughed and set the bundle where she directed. Arabella opened the top copy. The type was clear, the margins generous, and the instructions ended with a sentence Theo had insisted she write herself. No person who manages your property should fear your questions. Dominic read it over her shoulder. I feared yours, he said. I know. I sometimes still do. That may be wise. He did not touch the cabinet or ask for a key. Instead, he moved to the client table and began arranging blank paper for the women expected that afternoon. The false seal remained above him, its broken bird unable to command anyone. Arabella watched him leave the center chair empty for her. Then she crossed the room, sat beneath her own name, and opened the door to the first petitioner. This time, no man had decided the ending before she spoke. The record remained open, the questions remained welcome, and every answer would carry the name of the woman who had earned the right to give it.